Hello, Ann and Vincent. The purpose of this video is to introduce a few changes that I've made in the workshop and to introduce one of the two articles on reflection, this article by Hansen. Now, this one is kind of straightforward compared to the other one, which you'll see later in the module on philosophy. Right? So this article by Hansen is really on a simple question. Is it better to ask questions about things that went well or about things that need to be improved? Right? Now, this article is reporting on a simple experiment where student teachers were asked one set of questions from a negative direction and one set of questions from a more positive direction. So if it was a problematic experience that they were asked to reflect on, they were asked things like, what do you think went wrong? What made it go wrong? What are you going to do about it? If it was a positive, it would be, what do you think went well? Why did it go well? And what are you going to do about it? All right, so I think most of us try to ask these kind of questions, both of these kind of questions, after a teacher teaches a lesson if we're doing some coaching. And usually we start with the positive, right? What went well? Let's talk about a couple things that went well. Now let's talk about a couple things to improve. Right? And this article does not necessarily say that's the wrong approach, but there's some interesting data coming out here. All right. So first bit of interesting data is the kinds of things people focused on when they were asked to reflect on something positive versus something problematic. So it was more traditional kind of concerns that student teachers focused on when talking about something that needed to be improved or that was problematic. How well they prepared a lesson, how well they were able to get students to have time on task, etc. But overwhelmingly, when asked to reflect on positive experiences, they thought more student-oriented. It was about the motivation of the pupils for the subject and whether or not the pupils think about the content of the lesson individually in small groups or by class discussion, the mode of teaching. Right? All right, here's the second part that I found really, really interesting. If you can imagine a grid and you're putting their answers into 4 different categories. So the categories would be based on whether or not the situation was conservative or traditional approach to teaching or an innovative approach on one axis, conservative or innovative. And on the other axis, it would be whether or not they asked a problematic question or a positive question. Right? So here's how it went. If they were asking about a conservative idea in teaching or traditional idea in teaching and something problematic in the lesson, then the resolution that the student teacher proposed was always of a conservative nature. So in other words, if they were lecturing and students weren't listening, then the student teacher would think, how can I control the students more? How can I get them to listen to my lecture more? Right? There were no examples of a conservative, traditional kind of teaching and something positive. Now, that could be because if you're thinking traditional and maybe from a control perspective, like the best you can possibly hope for is that you accomplish what you already expected to anyway. And if you don't accomplish what you were expected to accomplish, then that's a negative. So there's no like, wow, I did it exactly like I thought I would do. That people don't interpret that necessarily as a positive experience. Right? The other two possibilities then are if it's an innovative approach, something that went wrong or something that went well. All right, so you could do an innovative approach. Now, not that this is all that innovative, but just for the sake of an example, student teacher does collaborative groups. That could go well or poorly. So they do collaborative groups and it goes poorly. The teacher can't transition the students into the groups don't use their time well, one student does all the work, there's a lot of off-task talking, the teacher doesn't know how to keep students on track. Innovative experience and problematic. When that happens, the teacher always then solves the problem with a conservative approach. Oh, group work doesn't work, students get off task, I have to start lecturing. The only time when reflection in this kind of scenario led to more innovative teaching was when it was an innovative experience and they were asked positive questions about it. Then then the teacher would come to, let's do some more of the innovation. So I did group work, students got more engaged than they normally do, I'm going to do more group work. So now this is a pretty small scale experiment, but I find it kind of intuitively appealing, and the data is pretty strong even though it's very small. And so if this is right, it kind of begs the question of whether or not we should ask a balanced set of questions, tell me something that went well, tell me something that went poorly, or whether we should really emphasize things that went well, especially when a student teacher tries something new.